Welcome to part 1 of deploying Django applications to production using Heroku. There are a lot of moving parts and pieces to deploying Django to Heroku. It's not necessarily hard, but there's a lot to consider. So on this page, we're going to talk about the assumptions and we'll talk about the deployment technology checklist. I find it helpful to have all those things in one place so I can refer to them. If we're missing any one of these, it's not going to work as we anticipate it will work. So first of all, for assumptions for this training, you're deploying a Django project to Heroku and you're using Postgres as your backend database. You will also be electing to store your database on AWS or Amazon Web Services S3 bucket. I'm going to talk about that. We'll talk about exactly how that happens and what we need to do. What's Heroku? You may have heard of it, you may not. I will assume you have not. Heroku is a fairly popular cloud platform where you can deploy an application for free or for a fee. I've done it for Flask and I've done it for Django applications. There's a lot of parts and pieces to it, but there are some really great benefits for how it integrates with Django and also the Flask framework if you're a Flask user. So let's take a look at the deployment technology checklist. These are all the technologies of one sort or another that we will need to install to make this work. Let's go through them one by one. We're not going to tell you how to do it in this particular slide, but in the upcoming slides, we're going to take on each and every one of these. You'll need, obviously, a Heroku account. To do that, simply go over to the Heroku homepage and it'll walk you through how to set up an account. It's quite easy. You'll need both a local Git repository and also a GitHub account and repository. So what are these? You may not be familiar. I'll assume for our purposes here today, you're not. So Git is a version control system. It's a tool to manage your source code or the bits, the code that you're writing using Django. GitHub is a web-based Git repository hosting services. So Git is the tool and GitHub is the service for projects that use Git. AWS, as we mentioned before, Amazon Web Services, has something called an S3 bucket. This is a place where we can store data so that we'll be able to retrieve it. So we're going to be able to do this. So we're going to see how Amazon Web Services, which is actually another cloud product, works with Heroku. Then we have a utility called DJ-database-URL. This is a Django utility that allows you to utilize the database_URL environment variable to configure your Django application. This is very useful for a production deployment. White Noise is an application that allows you to serve up your own static files like images and CSS files, that type of thing. Django/Heroku, this package automatically configures your Django application to work on Heroku. Heroku Postgres add-on is another Heroku technology, and it provides support for the Django database when we're using it with Heroku. Gunicorn is a production web server for Heroku. Gunicorn stands for Green Unicorn. It's a Python WSGI HTTP server for Unix compatible with Heroku. And finally, we need 3 specific files that will aid us in our deployment to Heroku from Django. We'll need a gitignore file. What this is this excludes specified file types from being pushed to the Git repository. Then we need our requirements.txt or text file. This saves your Django virtual environment settings and all the packages that you plug in, so you have it in one handy place for deployment to Heroku, so it knows what packages you need. And finally, your proc file. This file is used to explicitly declare your application's process types and entry points. It's located at the root of your repository where you would have your manage.py file. So the first thing we'll take on is modifying your Django project to get it ready for production. So these 2 steps are broken down, but they're really taken together. What we want to do is we want to create a directory that will turn into a Python package. And the way Python does that is you create inside of that directory something called an init.py. And it's a special type of object called a dunder because it has 2 underscores on either side of that file name. So it's __init__.py. That file goes inside the settings folder, or now the settings package, right? Because when we put it there, it turns the directory into a Python package. And that directory, that Python package called settings, goes into that second level My Project 1 directory. So you have your root My Project 1 where manage.py lives. Then you have your Python package inside that called My Project 1, same name, but it lives inside the root. And then inside of that is where you want to put that settings Python package with the init.py in it. Next, we will rename our existing settings.py to old settings.py or whatever you choose. Then we'll create a new file in the new settings directory or Python package called base.py. Now, copy the entire settings.py file content into that file called base.py. Django will work fine because the widget.py file will look in the settings folder for the settings file since we made it a Python package. That's the benefit of making it a package with that init.py file. Now we'll make two more changes. Make the following changes to that new __init__.py file. We'll add from.base import star. That, of course, imports everything from the base file. Then we'll make the following changes to the new base.py file. We'll add this statement, a base directory, so base_dir and that full path. We'll have to import OS if it's not already in there. The significance of the base_dir variable is it lets Django know where your manage.py file lives. Django, as you know by now, relies heavily on this file for the framework to work. Next, we'll create a local.py and a production.py as sister files to that base.py in the settings directory. Following that, we'll make the following changes to the local.py and the production.py files. We're going to turn debugging off. We'll make sure that's false so that nobody sees any errors should our application fail. And we'll add this statement, allowed_host equals star, with the brackets around it and the quotes as you see it. Finally, we'll change the double_init_.py so that it looks like this. We'll do the try except blocks as follows. So now that we turn debugging off, you say to yourself, but maybe I'll find it useful to still be able to see my errors. To that we say, you can add a place for errors to go by adding this statement to your production.py file, admins equals, and then the name and an email address. And you see it there. This will send errors to the specified email address that you put in that statement. Of course, use your specifics here instead. I don't want your errors. Here's where we'll take a minute to install that dg-database.url package that we talked about earlier in our checklist. So we'll do a pip install dg-database.url. We'll get you there. And this pip freeze pipe to the requirements, or greater than sign rather, to the requirements.txt. All that'll do is, you'll see me do that a lot through the presentation. Every time I install a new package, I want to make sure it's captured in my requirements.txt file. So that's why you'll see that there. So now we'll make changes to the production settings file as follows. Starting in number 3, we'll import dg_database.url. So in your production file, keep the original database settings that you have, but take out your password and port and change your engine to what I have below. I'll be very honest, this took me a while to figure out. I didn't feel that there was great documentation on this anywhere. So this is, if you've been using Postgres all along, this is what it looked like, only we had the password and the port included. So you want to make sure that you take those out and you have empty quotes instead. Then you'll add these two statements. You'll add database_from env, and then you'll have, using that database_URL package that we just installed, you'll have the configuration there. And then simply we'll have the database's default.update db from env. So we're going to put that in there. We'll update that with the environment statement that you just made above. Now we make all our changes to be able to serve the static files. So similar to the last page, we're going to do our pip install for white noise. Remember, that's the application that enables us to serve our own static files, and then we'll update our requirements.txt like we did there. Then it's simply making these setting changes to your production.py file. So the white noise.middleware.white-noise middleware statement goes in the middleware list. You'll see that in your production.py file. And then add this line wherever you like. I usually put it with my other static variables. So the static files _ storage. You set it there to correspond to the white noise application. Finally, you'll have your static root set as follows. Now here you see we're using that base _ variable setting. And then simply what you can do is run your collect static files. You might not need the Python 3. You might just be able to get away with Python. For me, since I operate on a Mac, I need the Python 3. Also make sure you have your load static tags installed in your templates. And image tags in your template should look like this. This has to correlate to how you have your particular directory structure configured. Okay, so this concludes part 1, all the changes that we made to our Django project. In the next several videos, we will talk about setting up Git and GitHub and Heroku.